Hi, everybody. I'm sharing this short video just to prompt you to think about some things for our discussion board for Friday. I'll post this along with the two questions that I'll ask that I'd like you to respond to by Friday at class time, and then we'll kind of go back and forth and discuss those during class time on our Canvas discussion board. During class, we talked about the idea that art and literature has to go through a process of gatekeeping before it can make it into mainstream audiences and into mainstream hands. And so this idea that even if we want to read a diverse variety of books, there are institutions and systems that might prevent that from happening, prevent voices from really getting out there and getting into our hands. And so this Instagram page is the page of a New Orleans chef. His name is Tunde Way. He is actually Nigerian born and is a Nigerian chef. That's the cuisine he specializes in. And he's also kind of known as not a food critic, but as someone who writes about food and culture. And he was supposed to have an essay published in a magazine at the onset of the pandemic, and that magazine decided not to publish it because people were more interested in comfort food and making sourdough starter and comfort baking and stuff, instead of kind of more social justice oriented critical commentary, which is what he was writing. And so he published his essay on Instagram instead. And so these images, the ones that are of him, are him posting the 7 parts of his essay that was supposed to be in a nationwide publication. And so he contextualizes this experience in the very first post. The next series of posts are an essay written in February. It was set to be published until it was killed because the coronavirus shifted the editorial priorities of the publication. They wanted to focus on recipes and things that brought people comfort while quarantining. Now media publications are talking that Black Lives Matter shit. Let's not forget that the media operates in news cycles and their allegiance is to the moment, not change. The title, Find Me a Nice Soft Place to Land. So he didn't post this right away in February. He posted it after a lot of the kind of discourse about Black Lives Matters became more out there when George Floyd was murdered back in June. And so you don't necessarily have to read the whole essay, although I will post the whole essay, or you could just read through his Instagram. And it's a really kind of thought-provoking essay about what it means to just be a member of our culture right now, particularly if you're a person of color. And there are some intersections with food and just other kind of cultural practices that he talks about in the essay. And so the question that I want you to answer, and I'll post the actual question on the discussion board, but the thing that I want you to think about is just the legitimacy of this essay. So when things get published in magazines and journals, those of you that have done research, that there's a certain legitimacy for something that's published in an academic journal, for example. And so, when you look through this essay, I just want you to kind of be able to speak to the value of the essay and the legitimacy of it, because this is something that he put out into the world for free, without any kind of system to review it, to say whether it was good, which if it were going to be published in a magazine, he would have had an editor look at it and decide whether or not it was good enough to be published, but they didn't. And so when we're talking about globalization, we talk about how the platforms really democratize the ability to put information out there, but is it at the expense of quality? And some people would make that argument that yes, it is, that things that don't go through that editorial process or that review process tend to have less quality or lower quality. And so I want you to read through Tunde Way's article, and just, is it possible for these social media platforms, and it could be Instagram, it could be a blog, it could be a self-publishing software, can they still produce high quality work that deserves our attention? So that's the first question that I want you to think about. And I'll link Tunde Way's essay and his Instagram page in the discussion question. So that's the first question. The second question is that I posted this article from The Atlantic about Indian matchmaking, and I wanted to highlight that section that you saw in blue. The author of this essay is a Dalit, which is one of the castes that we talked about in class, and she writes, this prejudiced treatment. Well, I guess I'll start a little bit above it. The pervasiveness of caste in Indian communities, even beyond the ambit of arranged marriages, has dangerous consequences for those of us born into quote-unquote lower castes. I myself am Dalit, the self-chosen identity for people formerly known as untouchables. And like I said in class, that caste category impacts very much whether or not people have the ability to get jobs, who they can marry, where they can live. And by get jobs, I mean like not just do they get hired, but do they even have the right to work, in a certain type of industry or a certain type of profession. That's how far-reaching and impactful these caste designations are still to this day, like right now, today in India. She goes on to write, this prejudice treatment includes, but is hardly limited to, workplace discrimination in the United States. For example, the state of California sued the tech company Cisco in June for allegedly failing to protect a Dalit employee from discrimination by his higher caste Brahmin managers. So you see that, along with all the other things that might get exported, those types of relationships between members of different castes also gets exported. So even though they're living in the United States, they're still practicing that cultural kind of identity as a member of this caste or a member of this caste. And it played out in the office and the workplace in the US. Goes on to write, when a popular show like Indian Matchmaking neglects this alarming fact of the Indian American experience, it quietly normalizes caste for a global audience. Okay. So what I am interested in there is this idea that we do want to have, representation from all over the world of what it's really like to be a member of that culture, of that place. And so Indian Matchmaking, by being on Netflix, is giving us exposure to this new cultural practice that we might not be aware of. Biodata, arranged marriages, matchmaking. Seema Auntie says, there's no such thing as an arranged marriage. It's either a marriage or a love marriage. So, arranged marriages are so normalized in Indian culture. And that's what this show is kind of like helping us to learn. But at the same time, it's reinforcing these practices within the culture that are really negative and not awesome, right? That our social justice kind of, feelers or antennas in the United States would say, well, actually, that's really discriminatory practice and, we shouldn't condone it. And so we've got this tension here where we have an accurate representation of what happens in India, but also this feeling that maybe we shouldn't be glorifying it because it's so negative. And so this is a question about responsibility, and it goes back to what we were talking about with the Oprah Book Club too, and all of the other kind of like quote unquote institutions that hold the power. Are they responsible for either criticizing this really negative social practice and harmful social practice in this case, or for making sure that they're putting out there, accurate and helpful representations of whatever it is that they're sharing. And so, in the case of Oprah and the book club, was it the organization, was it Oprah, et cetera? Because it wasn't Oprah, but her book club team, was it their responsibility to be a little bit more circumspect about the book that they selected to be in the book club instead of just selecting American Dirt and really kind of like polling Mexicans and Mexican Americans to see if this is an accurate representation of this experience, or is it not their responsibility? Just because they have the power to put that media in the public, do they have the responsibility to make sure that it's right, to make sure that it's just, to make sure that it's an accurate representation, et cetera? So that's what the second question is getting at, this idea of, who has the responsibility to make sure that the systems are accurate and fair when it comes to putting global literature out there. You know, I think about that like my responsibility to make a syllabus that's a good representation of the various cultures we're talking about. So, you know, is Netflix responsible? Is Oprah responsible? Is Reese and her book club responsible? And so that's what the second question I'll get to. So yeah, so I will go ahead and sorry, this is my very messy kitchen when I don't have a background, but I'll go ahead and post this, and I'll post our discussion questions and ask you to submit a response of 100 words by the beginning of class time on Friday. And then we'll see each other there on Friday during class at 1:30. All right, guys, stay safe because it's a tropical storm is happening. Bye.